Have you ever found yourself lying awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, completely convinced that a minor typo in an email you sent earlier that day is going to end your entire career? In that moment, the impending doom feels as real as gravity. Your heart is racing, your palms are sweating, and your brain is presenting this catastrophic outcome not as a possibility, but as an absolute certainty.
It is a universally exhausting human experience. In the quiet of the night, without the distractions of the day, our minds become these incredibly dramatic theatres. We take a tiny fragment of reality, like that email typo, and suddenly we are screening a feature-length tragedy. And the fascinating, almost terrifying part is that our bodies react exactly as if the tragedy is already happening. The cortisol spikes, the adrenaline floods our system, all because of a story we are telling ourselves.
Exactly. A story. But in that moment, it does not feel like fiction. It feels like the evening news. It feels like undeniable truth. And that brings us to the core of what we are unpacking today. A concept that sounds deceptively simple, but has the power to completely rewire how we experience life. The realization that your thoughts are not facts. It is such a radical shift in perspective. We are so conditioned to trust our own minds implicitly. If I think it, it must be true, right? Why would my own brain lie to me?
Well, to put it bluntly, your brain does not care about the truth. It cares about survival. From an evolutionary standpoint, your brain is a prediction machine, and it is heavily biased toward the negative. Think about our ancestors foraging in the wild. If they saw a rustling in the bushes and thought, oh, it's probably just the wind, and it turned out to be a predator, they were removed from the gene pool. But if they assumed it was a predator, panicked, and ran away, they survived. Even if it was just the wind, the cost of a false alarm was zero, but the cost of missing a real threat was death.
So we are the descendants of the paranoid survivors, the ones who jumped at shadows. That makes so much sense. We have inherited this ancient, hyper-vigilant alarm system, but we are deploying it in modern office buildings and grocery stores. The rustling in the bushes is no longer a saber-toothed tiger. It is a text message from a friend that just says, "okay," with a period at the end. And suddenly, our ancestral alarm system goes off, screaming that we are being socially ostracized and will die alone in the wilderness.
That is a perfect analogy. We have this incredibly sophisticated hardware, but it is running an outdated operating system. The brain is essentially an overzealous security guard. It is constantly scanning the environment internally and externally, looking for potential threats. And when it does not find any obvious physical threats, it starts manufacturing social and emotional ones. It takes that text message with a period, looks at the vacuum of actual information, and fills it with the worst case scenario. It says, they are mad at you, you did something wrong, the relationship is over. It presents this hypothesis as a certified fact.
And because we do not question the security guard, we just accept the report. We do not say, "hey, let me see the actual evidence for this." We just start acting as if the friend is furious with us. We get defensive, we withdraw, or we send a frantic apology for something we did not even do. We create a real-world conflict based entirely on a hallucinated premise. It makes me wonder, how much of our daily suffering is entirely self-generated by these cognitive distortions?
An overwhelming majority of it. Psychologists call these cognitive distortions for a reason. They are warped lenses through which we view reality. Mind reading is a classic one. where we are absolutely certain we know what someone else is thinking, usually something negative about us. Then there is catastrophizing, where a minor inconvenience is projected into a life-ruining event. And fortune telling, where we predict the future with total pessimism. We do this all day long. We generate tens of thousands of thoughts a day, and a huge percentage of them are just junk mail. But instead of letting them go to the spam folder, we open every single one, read it, and believe it.
The spam folder metaphor is brilliant. Imagine if you treated every spam email as a legally binding document. If you got an email saying you owed $1 million to a fake prince and you immediately sold your house to pay it, we would call that absurd. Yet when our brain sends us a thought saying, "You are an imposter and everyone is about to find out," we treat it as a subpoena. We immediately start packing up our mental desks. Why is it so hard to create distance between ourselves and our thoughts?
A lot of it has to do with how seamlessly our consciousness operates. We are so fused with our thoughts that we do not even realize there is a separation between the thinker and the thought. Western philosophy actually reinforced this fusion for centuries. Think about Descartes' famous declaration, "I think, therefore I am." It essentially equated our existence with our cognitive output. It suggested that our identity is fundamentally woven into our thoughts. If you believe that you are your thoughts, then rejecting a thought feels like rejecting a part of yourself.
That is a profound point. I think, therefore I am, basically validates every random, anxious firing of our synapses as a core part of our identity. But modern psychology, and certainly ancient mindfulness practices, suggest something entirely different. They suggest that you are not the thoughts. You are the space in which the thoughts occur. You are the observer. Moving from "I am my thoughts" to "I am the one observing my thoughts" feels like taking off a heavy backpack you didn't know you were wearing.
It is the ultimate liberation. When you realize you are the observer, you start to see thoughts for what they really are, temporary mental events. They are just data passing through the system. A great way to visualize this is to think of your mind as the sky and your thoughts as the weather. Sometimes it is sunny, sometimes there is a massive thunderstorm, and sometimes it is just dreary and overcast. But the sky itself is never damaged by the storm. It just holds the weather until it passes. When you have a dark, self-critical thought, it is just a storm cloud rolling through. You do not have to build a house inside the cloud and live there forever.
I love that. You do not have to build a house inside the storm cloud. But let us be real. It is really tempting to buy real estate in the storm cloud. When a thought carries a heavy emotional charge, it has a magnetic pull. If I have the thought, "I am going to fail this presentation," the fear is so visceral that stepping back to just observe the cloud feels almost impossible. How do we actually practice this in the heat of the moment? How do we stop taking the bait?
It takes deliberate practice, and it starts with a technique called cognitive diffusion. The goal is to diffuse the explosive power of the thought. The simplest way to start is by changing the language you use in your own head. When you think, "I am going to fail," you are stating it as a fact. The shift is to mentally add a prefix. "I am having the thought that I am going to fail." Just adding those few words inserts a wedge of space between you and the thought. It labels the thought as a thought, not a prophecy.
I am having the thought that is incredibly practical. It immediately downgrades the thought from a breaking news alert to an opinion piece. And if you want to push it even further, you could say, I notice I am having the thought that I am going to fail. Now you are 2 steps removed. You are the observer, noticing the machinery of your brain, producing a hypothesis. It completely changes the relationship to the anxiety.
Exactly. And once you have created that space, you can start interrogating the thought. You can act like a cross-examining attorney. When the brain says, everyone at this party thinks you are boring, you pause and say, okay, that is an interesting hypothesis. What is the evidence for that? Usually the evidence is flimsy at best. Maybe one person looked at their watch. Then you ask, what is the evidence against this thought? Well, 2 people are actively engaging in conversation with me, and someone just laughed at my joke. You force the brain to move out of the emotional primitive center and into the logical, rational prefrontal cortex.
It is like demanding to see the manager of your own brain. Excuse me, who authorized this catastrophic narrative? But looking beyond just our personal anxiety, I want to explore the macro impact of this. Because what happens when millions of people are walking around implicitly trusting every thought they have? It seems to me that treating thoughts as facts is not just a personal mental health issue. It is a massive societal vulnerability. If my thought is a fact, then anyone who disagrees with me is not just offering a different perspective. They are denying reality. They become an enemy.
You have hit on something incredibly important. This cognitive fusion is at the root of so much of our current societal polarization. We are living in an era of echo chambers where algorithms feed us information that perfectly aligns with our pre-existing thoughts. So the brain's internal bias is being validated by an external technological bias. When a thought arises about a political issue, a social group, or a cultural trend, and we treat it as an absolute truth, we lose the capacity for empathy and nuance. We stop being curious. If you already possess the fact, there is no reason to listen to anyone else.
That is chilling, honestly. The death of curiosity. Because curiosity requires the humility to admit that your current thought might be incomplete or entirely wrong. If we look at the most intractable conflicts, whether they are arguments around a dinner table or geopolitical crises, they almost always involve 2 sides that have completely fused their thoughts with absolute truth. They are no longer arguing about reality. They are arguing about 2 competing hallucinations.
And the tragedy is that both sides feel entirely justified because their nervous systems are reacting to their thoughts as if they were physical realities. This is why learning to untangle ourselves from our thoughts is not just a self-help exercise for reducing stress. It is a civic duty. It is a prerequisite for a functioning democratic society. We have to be able to say, I strongly suspect this is true, but I recognize it is a mental construct and I am open to new data. That level of cognitive flexibility is the only way we bridge the divides we are facing.
So, in a way, questioning our thoughts is an act of rebellion. We are rebelling against our own evolutionary programming, and we are rebelling against a culture that profits off our outrage and certainty. When a social media platform tries to trigger a thought of anger or inadequacy, realizing this thought is not a fact is like Neo stopping the bullets in the Matrix. You suddenly have the power to just look at the code and say, no, I do not accept this.
That is a phenomenal way to frame it. It is a superpower. And like any superpower, it takes time to master. You will still have days where you get completely swept away by a thought. You will still have 3 a.m. wake-up calls where the anxiety feels entirely real. The goal is not to stop having negative or irrational thoughts. The brain is an organ that secretes thoughts just like the stomach secretes acid. You cannot stop the production line. The goal is simply to change how you interact with the product. You let the thoughts arrive, you acknowledge them, and then you let them leave without offering them a seat at the head of the table.
You let them leave without offering them a seat at the head of the table. That is such a powerful image. We spend so much energy trying to control what we think, trying to force ourselves to have only positive thoughts. But that is just another trap, isn't it? It is fighting the weather. The true peace comes from surrender, not surrendering to the content of the thought, but surrendering the need to control the thought, just letting it drift by.
Precisely. Trying to suppress a thought usually just makes it stronger. If I tell you right now, whatever you do, do not think about a pink elephant, what happens? The pink elephant is immediately in your mind. The resistance creates persistence. Instead of fighting the pink elephant, you just say, there is a thought about a pink elephant. How interesting. And then you return your focus to whatever you were actually doing. It is the gentle art of non-attachment. It sounds passive, but it actually requires immense internal strength.
It is the strength to tolerate uncertainty. Because when we cling to a thought, even a painful one, it gives us a false sense of certainty. We would rather be certain that we are going to fail than live in the ambiguous space of not knowing what will happen. Letting go of the thought means stepping into the unknown, which brings us right back to our evolutionary fear. But on the other side of that fear is an incredible amount of freedom.
Freedom is exactly the right word. Think about how much mental energy is freed up when you no longer have to defend, analyze, or act upon every single thought that crosses your mind. You suddenly have all this bandwidth available for actual living, for being present with the people around you, for creativity, for joy. You stop living in the simulated reality of your mind and start participating in the actual world unfolding in front of you.
This has been such a profound journey today. We have gone from the evolutionary survival tactics of our ancestors to the modern anxiety traps of text messages, all the way to the philosophical foundations of our identity. And it all hinges on this one simple, paradigm-shifting truth. Your thoughts are not facts. They are suggestions. They are hypotheses. Sometimes they are just poorly written fiction by a brain that is trying a little too hard to keep you safe.
And the next time your brain tries to hand you a script filled with disaster, criticism, or despair, remember that you do not have to read the lines. You are the observer. You are the sky. Let the weather pass and see what remains when the clouds finally clear.
I cannot think of a better place to leave it. As you go through the rest of your day, we challenge you to catch just one thought, just one, that you normally accept as absolute truth, and ask yourself, where is the evidence? You might be surprised to find that the cage you have been living in has never actually been locked. Until next time, keep questioning, keep observing, and remember to give yourself a little grace.